everyone, welcome back to their hardware news recap for the week. This one includes rumors about the 9060 and 9060 XT. Just in case you didn't want to get off the wild GPU ride, it's still going. You can still get tickets. They're still scalped. The ride will continue to operate until the morale improves. Additionally, you can jailbreak your AMD CPU. New security research from Google's Bug Hunters program. Pretty interesting stuff. Further, NVIDIA tries to fix the black screen and crashing issues again. We'll talk about the Steam game that was just a malware distribution service from a couple weeks ago. And additionally, a screen for laptops that expands. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Montech Hyperflow series of liquid coolers. The Montech Hyperflow aims to compete with other affordable liquid coolers by fighting on price to performance. In our testing, cooler performance was comparable to others in its class. The ARGB Hyperflow has an illuminated pump block with RGB LED fans that have quality rubber bumpers for vibration damping. The cooler has a 6-year warranty and supports all modern Intel and AMD sockets, and you can learn more at the link in the description below. Up first, some quick GN updates. So just a heads up for you all, we're going to do a brief production slowdown. We have a ton of videos prepped, so it won't look too different from the outside. We're going to have 1 week where it's a little lighter on videos, which is intentional. I just wanted to give you all a heads up. The reason for this, we do this roughly 4 times a year, and it is to both overhaul some testing processes, patch things that we want to work on. So for example, I've got a ton of cool stuff I want to post on the website I haven't had time to do. So we're going to work on that. And then additionally, it's just because it's been a lot lately, a lot of GPUs, and I want to give the team and myself a break. And so we're going to slow down a little bit. It's going to be a couple days off here and there, and then behind the scenes working on just kind of getting the next cool things up. So last time we did this, just for some reference points, we introduced the mega charts pages. One of the things I'm doing this time is I'm going to update those. We're going to update the GPU mega charts page. It'll contain all the data where recently in our GPU review videos, we've had so much that we can't fit it on the charts anymore without it becoming completely illegible. Now it's only mostly illegible if you're on mobile, but it would be entirely useless if we had everything on there because there's like over 50 entries or something. So what we're going to do is render out a full version of those charts and update it on the mega charts page sometime over the next 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And a couple other updates too, so like the CPU coolers chart, mega charts page, that needs an update. And those are our, if you don't know them, there are permanent pages on the website, gamersnexus.net, which is, there's no third-party ads on it. It's super fast, very convenient, and we maintain that as a resource because I like it, and so you all can hopefully benefit from it too. But the CPU cooler mega charts page contains basically all of our cooler data from reviews, and we need to add some of the new stuff on there. The GPU one, same thing. I'll see if I can do the CPU one. CPU one's a little, there's going to be a mix of new and old data for reasons we discussed in the 9950 X3D review. So anyway, that's kind of what we're working on, plus just, again, a brief break. So we should have a good amount of videos going up regardless. And then we're back in the full swing of stuff in a couple weeks. I'm really excited for that because, 1, I have some cool GNCA stuff planned. 2, some really cool long-form content for this channel. A couple of the other things I'm really excited to work on during this sort of break from production is working on the GPU comparisons, where there's actually a comment I really liked in the fake MSRP video about the AMD launch, where the commenter said it'd be great if you guys could figure out some kind of metric to compare GPUs that's not dependent on an assumed price. And we've tried that in the past, but reading that comment gave me a few ideas, and so we're going to work on those, basically developing some form of ratio where it's like, okay, let's just assume chaos. It seems like a safe assumption. If we assume complete chaos, then what is the chaos ratio? It's like the name of my next Tool song. So if we have a chaos ratio, then shout out to those of you who like Tool in the audience. You'll get the song sometime in the next 19 years. So if you have that ratio, I guess the goal would be, can we at least provide a deterministic statement of you should buy this card at a ratio of X to Y price, or the competing card at a ratio of A to B, or whatever. I guess it would be the same X to Y. And so we'll be able to look at that, and maybe it might be a sliding scale price to performance thing. We could do that pretty easily, like dollars per FPS or performance per dollar or whatever. We've done those metrics in the past, except as a sliding scale with multiple options, which we've also done in the past, but I'm gonna work on that. that'll be something that I could really put some time into when we're not trying to keep up with production. And so if you have ideas on that or requests, then definitely post them below because I'm going to read through them and see what we can integrate. Really excited about that kind of stuff. It's fun. It's fun to refresh the charts, try and find a way to, okay, we've got this challenge. The challenge is price isn't real. And so how do we provide at the end of the review a chart or something, a table that tells people if you're watching this and the conclusions are based on a certain price to performance, here's other price to performance metrics you can use in the event that price isn't real, isn't materialized, or just comes down or something. So as an example, if we say at price A, you should buy the 9070 XT, and at price B, you should buy the 5070 Ti, and then just kind of slide that on a scale. And maybe it's like basically almost like a, I don't know, a line plot, or it has error bars kind of used type of thing. Anyway, you can leave your comments below. That's the kind of stuff I love working on that whenever we do these breaks a couple times a year. Other thing I'm going to be working on, though, is new testing methodology. So I'm going to be writing up a methodology for getting an AM5 bench online, because now with the 9950X3D launching, it's time to get some cooling testing going on that CPU. So we were using AM4 and then Intel LGA 1700. We're going to keep LGA 1700, retire AM4 completely, I think, and move to a 9950X3D for higher heat load, dual CCD, like challenging X3D chip, something different. So that's something else that I'm going to be working on, kind of writing up the initial plan for that. And also, I'm just, I get to take a few days off. That's weird, and that we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it's possible. I want to wake up and be like, where's the GPU torture today? What is it? Pricing? Is it availability? I don't know what to do with myself. So once I get back from my break and I can go sit on top of a mountain in Taiwan and think about how should we test CPU coolers for a while, which is probably actually what I'm going to do. Then we're going to get that next bench rolling. So April. Once we hit middle of April, we should be kind of full speed ahead on some of these new cooler benchmarks. Cases are coming back in as well. And we're going to get a break from GPU chaos for a little bit. So that'll be nice. And then it'll be GPU chaos again with probably the 9060s and the 5060s. But anyway, on to the news. So up first, Google security research team and its Bug Hunters program, which has previously contributed to huge discoveries like Spectre and Meltdown, has another exploit it has shared. Researcher Travis Armandi, whose name has appeared a couple times in these news videos now, tweeted this: "You can now jailbreak your AMD CPU, fire emoji. As you all know, we like to capture the essence of emojis and quotes when they appear, so..." That's what he said. He said, "We've just released a full microcode toolchain with source code and tutorials," end quote. The blog post mentions an exploit known as entry sign, previously disclosed in relation to high-end EPYC CPUs. The news here is that Google has released its tools and instructions for hacking microcode in a way that can crowdsource further research. The initial exploit itself was disclosed in early February. Back then, the team wrote this, quote, "Google's security team has identified a security vulnerability in some AMD Zen-based CPUs. This vulnerability allows an adversary with local administrator privileges, rating 0, from outside a VM to load malicious microcode patches," end quote. The vulnerability applies from Zen 1 through Zen 4 architecture and could be used to compromise system security. Google's team classified the vulnerability as a high severity, stating this, quote, "Improper signature verification in AMD CPU ROM microcode patch loader may allow an attacker with local administrator privilege to load malicious CPU microcode, resulting in a loss of confidentiality and integrity of a confidential guest running under AMD SEV SNP," end quote. Now, we're not security experts by any means, so we'll rely on one more direct quote here. The microcode hacking tutorial from Google's Bug Hunters explains the process and states that the root cause of entry sign is, quote, "that the AMD Zen microcode signature verification algorithm uses the CMAC function as a hash function. However, CMAC is a message authentication code and does not necessarily provide the same security guarantees as a cryptographic hash function," end quote. The page then shows an example of this. As for what that means for end users, the Zen tool released by Bug Hunters in the news here could feasibly be used to author your own microcode to modify your CPU. Now, this is actually pretty interesting as an enthusiast function, because if you remember the old days, there were AMD CPUs in the past where you could unlock cores, where basically they were soft fused off, so they would bin down parts that were fully functional, and sell them into a lower classification of component. If you got lucky where it was still functional, it was just reallocated to be that lower tier part, then you could unlock cores and get the functionality of a more expensive part for cheaper. Now, this happened on GPUs too, where you could unlock CUs. And this was, of course, eventually patched, like all things that are fun and make less money for the companies. But the way it was done on GPUs was typically with vBIOS. So you could flash a new vBIOS on, and there you go. Suddenly you have a higher end GPU, and you paid less money for it. So in modern day terms, if this were still possible, you might think of it like if you could buy a 9070 and flash the BIOS and turn it into an XT, that'd be kind of the modern equivalent, but the companies have done a pretty good job at shutting all this stuff off. Now these days, again, unfortunately, it's mostly impossible to do this on CPUs and GPUs, but we'll see. It's possible that with access to these tools, someone can figure out something at least interesting. But of course, it is also crowdsourcing security research. So on Twitter, a user asked Ormandi if it'd be possible to unlock AVX512 instructions, as an example, on Zen 4. The researcher responded that it might be possible, but it depends. The reason it might be possible would be if AMD included the functionality, but maybe soft locked it behind microcode, or really anything where they've soft locked it behind microcode. These days, though, our understanding is that silicon manufacturers often hard to fuse components or functions off, meaning that if it's there, but it won't be used, they can permanently disable it in a way that's impossible to recover without circuit editing. But we'll see what comes out of it now that it's crowdsourced. Tom's Hardware additionally reported that the, quote, microcode does not persist through reboots. So if that's the case, you'd set it up for each boot. So if anyone sees any cool stories unfolding from this, or just security findings that would be critical to report on, then help us keep an eye on it. You can post comments in just pretty much any video, and I'll probably see it, at least if it's close to the time we launch it. And otherwise, the security team here from Google continues to do a damn good job at finding stuff. All right, up next, not to be outlasted in the news cycle by AMD for even the worst of things, NVIDIA has more to do. Now, it is launching a driver hotfix again, to try and fix the issues with instability or black screens and some clock issues for its new RTX 50 series GPUs. Now, you might be wondering, wow, those launched like a couple months ago. What's taking so long? Well, when there's only like 6 out in the wild, it takes a while for the reports to come back. Driver hotfix 572.75 included 2 notes. 1, quote, GeForce 5080-5090. Graphics cards may not run at full speeds on system reboot when overclocked. It's kind of like the opposite of overclocking. It's like literally the antithesis of it. But at least they're working on it. 2, GeForce RTX 50 series GPUs crash with black screen. It's possible that this will be integrated into a full driver version by the time this video goes up. They basically do the hot fixes and they roll them in. So if you're having issues with either of those, you could try the hot fix or the next driver, and maybe that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then I guess at that point, let us know, because that would be like 3 attempts or something that they've tried to do to fix it. Up next, according to International Data Corporation estimates, yes, that's the name of a company. It sounds straight out of Cyberpunk. IDC estimates that nearly 6 million PC gaming handhelds have been sold since when the Steam Deck launched in 2022, wow, to the end of 2024. Been a while. The IDC tells The Verge that it expects PC handheld shipments to total around 1,926,000 for 2025. Breaking down the numbers year by year, the company's estimates look like this. For 2022, it was 1.6 million. For 2023, it was about 2.9 million. For 2024, a reduction down to 1.5 million or so. And the 2025 estimate is 1.926. The Verge reports that the majority of those shipped units are dominated by the Steam Deck, per IDC data, which is purportedly bigger than the Asus ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, and MSI Claw combined. The publication writes, quote, but out of those 6 million shipments, the lion's share have been the Steam Deck itself, according to IDC's estimates. The Verge continues in its writing to say, quote, all of the 2022 shipments are the Steam Deck, and IDC market research analyst tells us upwards of 50% of the 2023 shipments and 48% of the 2024 shipments are the Deck as well. Doing the math, Valve has now shipped upwards of 3.7 million Steam Decks and has quite possibly crossed 4 million by now, end quote. A part of the reason for the expected regrowth in 2025 might be the launch of the new SoCs. So it's been a while where the Steam Deck hasn't had a major overhaul. The OLED was like a Steam Deck 1.5, so Valve stopped short of calling it a Steam Deck 2. In fact, they're very clear that to them it was not a Steam Deck 2. We talked about that in our teardown of it, but it was a major overhaul, just they still haven't moved to the newest silicon. And likewise, the Ally, the Claw's already moved, the Legion Go, these handhelds are starting to shift towards new parts, and that may cause a resurgence in the market. This is specific to PC handhelds, so it wouldn't include whatever's left of Switch sales, and there's the Switch 2 on the immediate horizon, of course. Up next, found via Tom's Hardware, laptop manufacturer Compal is making waves for its new design. Called the Infinite, the Compal design has an expanding screen that can be stretched from a 14-inch size to an 18-inch display size. So it expands an extra 4 inches, and apparently this is befitting of the product name Infinite. Close enough. 4, infinity, it's a small gulf. And no, we will not make the joke. We are not, this is a dignified publication. We will not stoop to levels of making the obvious easy joke about 4 inches being called infinite, okay? The Compal Infinite is pretty cool. Assuming the mechanical behavior doesn't cause some sort of RMA risk, this would allow more portability, but also still give the screen space once deployed. The laptop is technically a 14-inch notebook in every other way. It makes it more portable and smaller to fit in bags, but the screen can be slid out to expand fully and offer users a wider format. This uses a rollable OLED, similar to what's found in some TVs. This approach would mean that the display's aspect ratio changes when expanded, as it only expands in one direction. Likewise, you'd still be lacking the hardware power, the battery area, and the cooling capabilities of a larger laptop, since the actual component size, of course, remains limited to the 14-inch form factor body. Although that would be pretty cool if you could stretch the body of the laptop and suddenly the cooling expands and a GPU appears. Now, this, to me, is something I'm interested in, so when these eventually launch, I might try to buy one or something to test it, because for trade shows, when we cover those, I'm typically carrying 2 laptops personally. So I've got one that's a little stronger for things like video production if it's needed or whatever, Photoshop, and I have one that's meant for battery life, and that one is typically a 13 to 14-inch laptop that I use so that it's just ultra portable and it's focused on battery life. So this would be kind of a cool hybrid. We'd try it out when it becomes available. I would be a little concerned about the screen durability from travel use and things like that, but that'd be something to be tested. All right, next up, we've already mentioned that the RX 9060 is likely to arrive in April, but there's some new rumors out there, and they are filings, where it looks like there's a potential 8GB and 16GB model of a 9060 potential XT configuration. So for a quick recap of what we know so far. At the end of AMD's 9000 series announcement video that we previously reported on, David McAfee confirmed 9060 graphics cards releasing in Q2. He had stated at the time, quote, "And in the second quarter of this year, we'll broaden the family even further with the RX 9060 products, which we'll tell you more about later," end quote. So it's known to exist. Found via video cards more recently, known leaker Harukaze 5719 posted an Acer EEC filing, actually a couple of them, highlighting both 8GB and 16GB configurations of the 9060 XT. These EEC filings don't guarantee the arrival of a product, but when it's this close, and we already know something exists, they tend to be pretty accurate. There's speculation about these cards releasing in April to compete with NVIDIA's 5060 and 5060 Ti cards, but no definitive dates or prices have been given yet. As reported on before, Nintendo and the Pokemon company sued Palworld. This part isn't news. There is some, though. Developer Pocket Pair was being sued over alleged patent infringements by Nintendo. Nintendo, of course, the friendliest of companies, I mean, with its intellectual property lawyers, but they are very friendly to them. Nintendo previously stated, quote, "This lawsuit seeks an injunction against infringement and compensation for damages on the grounds that Palworld, a game developed and released by the defendant, infringes multiple patent rights," end quote. As we understand it, not all of the patents that Nintendo is suing over were granted at the time of filing the lawsuit. And so, in other words, it was suing over prospective patents in the future. And the newest information is that the United States Patent and Trademark Office, the USPTO, has recently rejected 22 out of 23 of the patent applications that are being leveraged in this lawsuit by Nintendo against Palworld. Hot Hardware adds, quote, "The one patent the USPTO is willing to grant Nintendo will only be granted if the company agrees to the rejection of the other 22, end quote." Now, if that takes out a potential for 22 additional claims, That's already a huge relief for Palworld because they'll have to defend against a lot fewer things. It may also go from sort of an existential threat to one where maybe they can make some changes and sort of pay their way out of it if Nintendo is successful or they settle. But that's a gigantic assumption that either one of those happens. Perhaps surprisingly, the one patent that wasn't rejected didn't pertain to the game's Pokeball-like mechanics, nor really anything related to Pokemon. It wasn't even related to the character designs appearing too similar to copyrighted Pokemon, although that wouldn't be a patent case, that would be a copyright case. Instead, GamesFray.com reports that it was in regards to, quote, the smooth switching of riding objects, end quote. Specifically, US patent application number 18/652,883 reads, quote, the non-transitory computer-readable storage medium having stored therein the game program, according to Claim 1, wherein the association with the player character approaching a ground of the virtual space while the player character is moving in the air aboard the airboarding character, switching from... Don't you love it when lawyers and judges try to understand video games? Anyway, switching from the airboarding character to the boarding character when the distance between the character and the ground satisfy a threshold value, end quote. The patent seems to be related to rideable mounts in-game. That's definitely been done before. So have flying mounts. I remember playing, I think it was called Drakengard or something on the PlayStation 2, which had flying mounts, but there has to be something novel and useful in the implementation of a patent filing like this. And of course, Nintendo thinks there is. They lay out several reasons they believe that's the case, and they have all of these claims in a multi-page document describing it, and so that's their defense for why that patent should be granted to them and why it's a novel and useful invention. On February 21st, the examiner at the USPTO sent back the amendments to the patent from Nintendo's application after indicating unclear language choice by Nintendo between the words catch and capture. The patent office is very specific on what language is used, and it sounds like Nintendo wasn't being specific enough. Either way, Nintendo is on shakier ground for this case than it was at the outset, narrowing it down to potentially one prospective patent is a massive swing from 23. Of course, they could appeal or fight back and all this stuff, but we'll keep covering it as it goes. Up next, a malware game finding its way onto Steam and ended up being Windows-based malware. The title, which is cheekily named PirateFi, was on Steam for a few days before Valve killed it and communicated to users who downloaded the title with this, quote, we are contacting you because you recently launched PirateFi, number 3476470 on Steam. The Steam account of the developer for this game uploaded builds to Steam that contained suspected malware. You played PirateFi on Steam while these builds were active, so it is likely that these malicious files launched on your computer. The builds containing the suspected malware have been removed from Steam, but we strongly encourage you to run a full system scan using an antivirus product that you trust or use regularly. They stop short of recommending one. And inspect your system for unexpected or newly installed software. You may also consider reformatting your operating system to ensure that no malicious software remains on your machine. Please contact Steam support with any further questions, end quote. Just in case any of the people affected are watching this, I'm not sure how many people downloaded this before Valve caught it, but if you're watching this for advice, there is anti-malware software that I sort of like. I don't really want to recommend it here though, because this is something, as we'll get into it, you'll see why. This is the type of malware that would concern me enough that I would just blow up the entire operating system. Like I would replace the whole damn thing, which sucks. But you don't really want to screw around with this stuff, because if you think you get it with some scanning utilities and there's something it doesn't get, or it gets the wrong thing, or it's dormant or whatever, my concern would be that these types of things are designed now to get access into accounts. You don't know when that's going to trigger later. If they get access to something, they can kind of sit there for a while, plant other methods to regain access, and there's just too much risk, especially a lot of this stuff targets investment websites, crypto websites, banking, stuff like that, or just Gmail accounts, which is a way to get access to all the other things I just said. Even if they don't get into banking directly, you start getting access through things like forgot password resets. So personally, I would just blow up the OS and reinstall something. Before Valve took down PirateFi, a Steam user noticed that their antivirus software was flagging the title as Trojan malware. Specifically, it was called Trojan.win32 Lazzy.gen. That's with 3 Z's. They took to Steam and wrote in a post, which has been machine translated, quote, "Be careful, and it seems to me that the reviews are not real." The user added, quote, "When you launch the game," in scare quotes, "the virus unpacks into the app data /temp/*** and looks like Howard.exe. It launches with the /very silent parameter and is not displayed to the user. After launch, it takes cookies from your browser and tries to access mail sites, mail.ru, yandex.ru, gmail.com, telegram.com, etc., and collects information from them or creates new cookies and sends them to the owner of the virus, not established," end quote. PCMag.com also caught wind of another Steam user writing on the title Steam page, which has since been taken down, for the game that is, quote, "Most of my stuff has either been hacked and passwords changed or being signed in using cookies that have been stolen," end quote. Another Steam user wrote on PirateFi's Steam page, quote, "Yeah, my Microsoft account got stolen from this Trojan," end quote, and added, quote, "They blocked Microsoft support from my emails and swiped it. Went in my Roblox and stole $20 and messaged all my friends scam links while taking all my Steam points to buy awards for bot accounts," end quote. PirateFi was purportedly based off of developer Easy Systems' Easy Survival RPG template, which is sold on Epic Games' Fab Marketplace. This is hugely alarming for a lot of reasons. I mean, genuinely, I can't say that this is a vector I had considered as malware ingress. Like, there's a lot of things you can do to protect yourself from malware. Being careful of which Steam games I buy and download I honestly can't say that has ever been on my list. Part of that is because normally by the time I get to a game and discover it, it's already been found by a ton of people. But the other one is, you do kind of expect that the purveyor of the software, with everything being through servers and downloads these days with these big companies like Valve, would actually check stuff. And maybe it's the case that they clear you for uploading. I don't know how Steam works. Clear you for uploading. They go, "This is a trusted account. Just let it do what it wants to maintain its game." All of these uploads look like they are coherent, consistent, and congruent with the game itself. Let it go. But maybe there needs to be a better system here. Up next, Intel commits to TSMC again for wafer supply. So found via TPU and redirected to SemiWiki. There was a Morgan Stanley conference recently that included discussion of Intel's continued outsourcing of silicon manufacturing to TSMC. Currently, Intel is using competitor TSMC for its GPUs and parts of its CPUs. Intel has struggled to get new fabs online. We've actually seen the construction sites in person. We have a whole video on them. It's actually really cool if you want to see it. But they've been delayed. And so relying on TSMC for manufacturing for its own product has been necessary while it works to realize its fab building goal. Notably, the SemiWiki forum pulled a quote from the call where Intel spoke to its TSMC allocation. Quote, "I think the core of the strategy continues to be standing up a world-class fabless company and a world-class foundry. From an Intel products perspective, I think there's a strong understanding that without that being healthy first," seemingly referring to the products here, "it's really hard to have a healthy Intel foundry," end quote. Speaking of new Intel co-CEO, or interim co-CEO, Michelle Johnston Holthouse, Intel's VP on the call said this, quote, "So I do think Michelle has been given a bit more agency to go off and make decisions around what she thinks is best for the product roadmap and for longer-term market share there. And I think the biggest sort of manifestation of that today is she probably has more agency to use TSMC longer and for more than she might have had 6 or 9 months ago. And to be clear, we have roughly 30% of our wafers outsourced to today. That's probably a high watermark for us. But to the extent that I think a year ago we were talking about trying to get that to 0 as quickly as possible, that's no longer the strategy. We think it's always good to have at least some of our wafers with TSMC. They're a great supplier. It creates a good competition between them and Intel Foundry," end quote. A little bit of a weird statement at the end there about, what was it? Creating good competition between TSMC and Intel Foundry. I mean, I guess on a technicality, that's absolutely true. If you buy things from your competitor, it is definitely helping your competition. I don't know that it's healthy if you can't compete, but it is certainly helping it's very competition friendly. It'd be like if you ran a hot dog stand. First of all, sandwich or hot dog. You can have your debate in the comments. You walk back across the street from your competitor with a hot dog and all your customers in line are like, wait a minute, why Why aren't you eating yours? And you're like, oh, I mean, the fridge shut off last night. We didn't get it back on until this morning. We haven't had time to clean in a little while. The water hasn't really been changed in a couple weeks. And anyway, very healthy competition here. You should buy them here too. So I don't know, does it make sense? Doesn't matter. Nothing in this industry does anymore. So why do the analogies need to make sense? Do you hold me to an impossible standard if my analogies have to make as much sense as the Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA launches we've endured lately? Anyway, so the news here is that they're still using around 30% of the wafers from TSMC. Sounds like they're okay with continuing to do so, which is a deviation from the previous goal of getting down to 0 as fast as possible. So that's kind of the recap of that. So that's it for hardware news. Thanks for watching as always. And again, we'll have a brief slowdown in production so that the team can catch a break and so we can work on some cool stuff behind the scenes for videos coming up in the future. And otherwise, subscribe for more. We've got plenty coming up because we've queued a lot of really good content. And you can go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly or patreon.com/gamersnexus. And we'll see you all next time.